I don't know if I can ever trust again. I don't know if I can ever hope again. I don't know if I'll ever really feel happy again. These are sentiments that you've probably had yourself after trauma or after something really difficult that happened to you. Or maybe you've heard it from someone else. But the idea is that just because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes the barrier of a difficulty from you, doesn't mean that the impact of that is not going to be felt for a very, very long time. And are there du'as that can actually change emotions, that can actually change the way that we feel about the past, present, and future? And the answer is absolutely. The Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic narration that there is no one amongst you, and I want to emphasize here that he said there is no one amongst you, meaning that this is for all of the Muslims, who when he is stricken with grief and anxiety, and who says this dua, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove his anxiety and will replace his grief with joy. So it's a powerful dua. And you can imagine that when the Sahaba heard this, they said, Ya Rasulullah, should we teach other people this dua? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, absolutely, whoever hears this should learn it, and by extension, should teach it as well. So what is this dua that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is teaching us? It's such a beautiful and comprehensive dua. He said, say, Allahumma inni abduk, ibnu abdik, or you could say, wabnu abdik. Allahumma inni abduk, ibnu abdik, ibnu amatik, ناصيتي بيدك ماض في حكمك عدل في قضاؤك أسألك بكل اسم هو لك سميت به نفسك أو أنزلته في كتابك أو علمته أحدا من خلقك أو استأثرت به في علم الغيب عندك أن تجعل القرآن ربيع قلبي ونور صدري وجلاء حزني وذهاب همي. So let's look at the beginning. Oh Allah, I am your slave. I am the child of your male slave and the child of your female slave. Which means what? Number one, it is absolute submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The slave does not disobey his master. The slave does not question his master. And this is unlike any type of human relationship. When a person submits themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they find nothing but love, nothing but glory. And the more that someone humbles themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more Allah honors them. So you're saying from the very beginning, I submit everything to you, Ya Allah. I am your slave, and I descend from humble beings as well. I'm not entitled. I'm just your slave, and I'm pleased to be your slave because that is the greatest station of honor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And my forelock is in your hand. Now I want you to think about the image of someone who has their forehead in the hand of someone else. What does this represent? It represents that I am completely submitted to you, and you have complete control over me. And some of the scholars say it also means the submission of intellect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That I submit my own thinking to your revelation, that you know better than me. And I'm okay with that, right? I'm pleased with that. And I am content with your revelation even when I can't understand your revelation. So first and foremost, I submit myself intellectually to you. And you are in full control over me. Your judgment upon me is assured. مَاضٍ فِي حُكْمِكَ. Meaning what? Everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed is going to happen, and I'm content with that as well. And on top of that, the expression, عَدْلٌ فِي قَضَاءُكَ, that verily your decree concerning me is just. SubhanAllah, think about a person who turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and says, life has been unfair, you've been unfair, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? The difference between that person and someone who turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and says, I have no doubt that everything you have decreed for me is just, that you've never been unfair to me, O Allah. And you affirm that in your dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَاضٍ فِي حُكْمُكَ عَدْلٌ فِي قَضَاءُكَ. So all of this is praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and expressing your submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you say, I ask you by every single name that you have named yourself with. One of the most blessed ways to have your dua answered is to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a specific name that fits your specific request. So if you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy, you call upon Him as Ar-Rahman. If you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His forgiveness, you call upon Him as Al-Ghafur. If you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His rizq, for His sustenance, you call upon Him as Ar-Razzaq. But here, this is all encompassing. Every single name that you have, oh Allah, I am including it in this dua. The names that you have named yourself with, meaning the ones that I'm aware of, the ones that you have revealed in your book, the ones that you taught to any one of your creation, or the ones that are completely kept to your knowledge in the unseen. Now think about that for a moment. There are names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we don't even know. that no creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and the specific dua that you may be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with might match one of those particular names. And here, you're including it in your dua. So just like when you make istikhara, you say, Allamul Ghuyub, that you know everything that happens in the unseen in regards to this decision that I'm trying to make. Here, oh Allah, whatever name that you have that matches the ask that I have, then I invoke that name, even if I don't know that name, and I'm comfortable not knowing that name. So I ask you by every single name that you have, oh Allah, to make the Quran the spring of my heart. Now, by the way, it would be pretty strange to ask Allah to make the Quran the spring of your heart and to not read the Quran. So just like with every other dua, there has to be a deed that matches the dua. So you're resorting to the Quran and you're asking Allah, make the Quran the spring of my heart. What does it mean to make the Quran the spring of your heart? The scholars mention that the spring of the heart means give it life once again. So if you think about dead land, nourish it, give it life once again. Let it spring once again after death. And then the second part of this, and to make it the light of my chest. Now, subhanAllah, what do crops need? They need the soil, they need nutrition, and they need light. And light clarifies, light alleviates, light relieves. So it's like, give me life after death. And indeed, some people, subhanAllah, they feel the death of their heart. Give me life in my heart after the death of my heart, or what I feel like is the death of my heart. And then give me light in my chest. Relieve the burdens. Give me clarity. وَجَلَاءَ حُزْنِي وَذَهَابَ هَمِّي. And let it be the banisher of my sadness, and let it be the reliever of my anxiety. SubhanAllah, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place the Quran in a certain relationship with you to where it removes the impact of the past and the anxiety about the future. And indeed, the Quran is a cure. And here you're making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the Quran to assume its rightful place with you. So the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever says this dua, it will remove every single anxiety and it will replace every sadness, every form of grief with joy.